Alright, this is Ralph Raven, aka Nefarious Yodel, and we're gonna be playing some tactics, some chess tactics to be more precise. And here we have a 1600 rated count, quite low indeed, so really I wanted to get about 1800 back, because that's what I've been at for the last year or so. It shouldn't be too difficult, but then again, there might be a reason that I fell down so much. I don't know, right? Maybe I'm just not as good anymore because I didn't practice. But I don't think at this level of gameplay that's relevant. I think that would be relevant if you're much, much higher rated than anything like 1800, 1900, 2000, not even 2100. That's right about where I can stop saying that. 2200 I can imagine you could fall back down if you stop practicing for a while. But even then, not that much. Not 200 or 300 points. No way, right? So let's just see, let's look at this tactic. It's white to move. I've been looking at it, of course, while I've been talking, but I haven't really found any satisfactory answers. The rook on e8 has two defenders and one attacker. Now, I can't really pull off any defenders there. I can pull off one of them with something like bishop c7, right? Bishop c7 probably wouldn't even pull it off. You could even play queen c8, obviously, you can just take here, but that means that it's quite useless. Problem is that even though the queen could have been overloaded, there's two problems. First of all, they have an extra defender, and secondly, all these from d7, which it also has to defend, it can still defend e8. So that one of these conditions is that you should have 2 points of defense, from which you can't defend the other piece, right? That's kind of when overloading starts to become more viable. I'm looking at bishop takes h6, of course, just completely busting open the king side. Then pawn takes, right? Otherwise you're in even more trouble than you already might be, right? So pawn takes h6, and then I'm just looking for this kind of checks. Maybe something, even just getting the minor piece back might already be enough, right? The minor piece is only defended once and attacked once, so it's a crucial... what's it called? I have a name for this in Dutch. I call it crucially defended pieces, right? And crucially attacked. It's like if anything happens to that piece in terms of attack or defense, it might be too little defense, too much attack, right? So here we see that fork on g4, right? With the king and that knight, which is a crucial piece. So essentially you could treat it like it's hanging, right? It's slightly different in the way it works. But essentially, yeah, you could say that. You could say, yes, it is hanging, right? So bishop takes, pawn takes, queen g4 check, king moves, and I think you got the freaking knight back with interest, right? And since the rook is defended, I don't see any counterattacks, because that's the next thing you want to look for. Whenever you think your attack works, you want to look for how it could possibly fail, right? Maybe you want to take with the rook first and then do this, right? Take with the rook, take with the queen, bishop takes. I don't really see the glaring difference here, to be honest, right? Maybe queen f8 to save the day. I feel like the queen could be a defensive resource. Yeah, I think that's actually the major difference here, that the rook cannot defend g7, but the queen can, because it can move diagonally, of course. So I'm gonna go with bishop 8 takes h6. And it seems like I've gruesomely failed the problem, and indeed you need to take first. So we're gonna analyze why that is, what happens if you take there. So you take, take, check, moves, takes, takes. I still don't see the issue here. Did I not win enough material? Did I fail to do one of the most basic things in the game, which is check how much material I'm behind? It seems like I'm one pawn down, and just breaking open the king plus getting a pawn back isn't enough, because now the queens are off the board. If I could do this and still have the queens on the board, this would be very lethal. But because they're already off the board, the king safety is not nearly as relevant. There's not nearly enough to really abuse that. So yeah, I guess that's a problem. Also, I'm surprised. Let's see. After I take here, so rook takes, queen takes. I actually want to distract the queen first. So what if I played here, then the knight can even interfere. That's even more interesting. So bishop takes h6 is completely off limits. With this move, I reflect... What? Let's see. Bishop takes. G takes. Yeah, I used to have these dreams about getting a check. But even if bishop takes, he can reject it and interpose with the knight, right? So bishop takes, the pawn itself wasn't a threat, and he can actually just block the attack. It's easy actually to block the attack. So I've made numerous analysis errors here, and really, queen takes, it's a beautiful move, and I can't believe I've missed that, right? I just can't believe it. And here we're just doing regular moves, right? It's nothing special anymore. So I've made numerous errors in how to attack and how to defend here. Completely off limits. Really embarrassing, but we'll just have to keep going and see if we can do better next time. Thinking about a tempo move here, like queen b7 check, and if he defends, I pick up the rook. So then, of course, the issue becomes defending two things at once, which might not be possible. So let's just first look at the material this time. I'm actually a knight down. This time I'm not going to make the same blunder as last time. I can just pick up the rook on a1, and I'm actually gonna lose my own rook there. So really, this should be all about that tempo, all about just gaining one tempo should be enough. This time, let's see. If the pawn moves, I just take. I really don't see why queen b7 check wouldn't just win you the game by taking the rook. This time I'm even in pawn, so that's not the issue here. I don't really have an attack on the king other than just a check, just to gain the tempo, right? There's nothing I can really do to it in the long run. So really, I just think the check is the only way to do anything here. I could take the rook and the knight for my queen. There's no point. I don't get anything out of that afterwards. Right, I can't attack a rook with my own rook and somehow win. It's just not possible unless the rook would have already been pinned down or whatever. So it's just not possible. I really have to just try queen b7 check here. And that seems to actually, that seems to work. Yeah, so unless I'm completely crazy, rook takes just wins you the rook and we're done here. So very low rated problem. It's like the maximum deviation possible, right? Like if you're 1600, you get a 1450 rated problem. It's pretty low. So usually if you get 1800 rating and you get a problem like this, you know there's a catch. Of course, that's kind of lame because in a real game you don't know if there's a catch. But in this, in Tactics Puzzle, you do get that extra bit of information down. So you can abuse that. You can really abuse that and get much higher rating than you otherwise would because you know exactly what kind of difficulty to expect. That's just the nature of the game. Really, there's nothing to be done about that. Lots of undefended pieces potentially. Like, let's just look at the material first because this is really suspicious. I'm only a pawn down. If I just take the rook, right? What's going to happen to me? Like I don't understand. Maybe I want to pin first, but then yeah, even I don't see why just taking the rook would fail. Oh, then there's bishop c8. See, sometimes you're only looking at trivial ways to defend, but then because of the difficulty of the puzzle, you know there has to be some slightly more obscure thing going on here. And the more obscure thing is actually the skewer. What's it called? Bishop c8, right? So actually I probably want to play queen a8 first. I don't believe in any knight fork because of the bishop on f6, right? It's just blocking both of those squares. So intentionally playing queen a8 check, I think is the best way of doing it. Let's just first make sure that if queen f8, I just take the rook and there's no longer any skewer potential. Oh, and actually I just thought of why not queen takes b7? There's no skewer there in that case. Is there a way to get the knight and the rook? I don't think so. question, is this a computer thing? So I'm really not sure what would happen, what the difference is between those two moves. So I could play it either way in my mind. I really don't see the difference. It's a coin toss here. It's a coin toss, one or the other. Queen a8 check, bishop c8, queen takes c8 check. You're only in more trouble now than you already were. I really don't see anything you can do about this. I think I can just take it like that. Apparently not. I really don't see, like, takes. Can I see it now? I'm trying to figure out, like, how could you possibly attack this and succeed? Takes, the rook has to be somehow like a rook and knight attack or something. Like, I don't see any sort of problem here. What could you possibly do here? Queen takes. Yeah, I've gone so far. What? Yeah, just one of these things. This is why, like, this is why these games are fundamentally about practice, because even though I can coach someone and say, these are the concepts you want to look out for, and this is the order in which you want to do that, and still, in my own gameplay, I miss those things, right? And I'm like, oh, right, I need to work on that. Oh, right, I need to... And as you keep doing that, eventually you start getting it. Not really getting it intellectually, but actually doing it, right? It just takes practice. I did not see this pawn. I really did not see that. All right, well, that's just sad. Whew. Well, failing a lot of problems here, but what can I do about it? If the knight here moves, then the king gets an escape square. Otherwise, this would be an easy checkmate. That, of course, opens up the door to candidate moves like rook c7 just to pin that knight, right? Like, that's often how you want to look at moves, right? Like, they have a function, right? And because they have a function, they're very specific. It's very easy to look for them, right? Once you're like, oh, I just need to deflect this piece, then you only have so many moves that could potentially deflect that piece. While if you don't know that, and you just have to randomly try out all moves, then it's like, you know, you're just never gonna find the solution. There's too many moves. So... like, I like the combination where you start out with the basics, you start out with looking at forcing moves, but very quickly after that, because you're not a computer, you're gonna miss forcing moves. You're gonna cut off sooner than later, and sometimes you have to look at quiet moves, there's all that good stuff. You really have to rely on pattern recognition beyond that quite quickly, right? So, still not really figured out what I have to do here. I don't think the queen check will do much. I'm worried about moves like king d8 if I play something slow like rook c7. I feel like I have to get that check in and really checkmate him forcibly, right? Actually, I think I can block off all squares except d8 perhaps. And that except is quite an important exception, right? So, pawn e7 check, king d8, then I'm kind of just stuck. I guess rook c8 check, and then king takes, queen takes e8 check. And then I'm kind of stuck already. So, if I play pawn, let's see, if I play queen f6 check, knight has to take now, because otherwise it would have been checkmate already. Let's see if I have any sort of access to that king. So, what the hell is going on here? What am I missing? What could I possibly be missing? I've looked at queen f8 check. I've looked at queen f6 check. Queen f8 check, knight takes, pawn check, king d7, and I already am running out of moves. knight takes, king d8. And I don't have a way to check. Rook check, king takes, of course, so that's just silly. So queen of 8 check. I don't see any other move, like a knight takes. What could I otherwise do here? Like rook c7 check, bishop d7. I don't see it. I just don't see the potential here for a move, for a play, for anything. I also don't see how queen e8 check would work. Like queen takes e8, king takes. Wait, what? Why? Where did I think it could escape? It's completely stuck, right? No, wait, it can go back to e7. That's the main problem here, right? That if I play rook c8 check, it can still go to e7. So can I somehow block that off? I don't think I can. Let's see. Pawn check. King d8. Ah, queen takes, and then the checkmate comes in. All right, so the pawn check's very interesting. If the pawn check comes in, and then I actually try to take, then the enemy tries to take with the knight, now I have maybe some play potential elsewhere. So maybe I can actually do queen f8 check now, because the knight is now gone. And now king d7, let's say. That's what I'm going to look at first, at least. And then I can actually checkmate him with knight takes f6. So I've successfully deflected the king. And I've actually discovered that pawn check and then king d8. Now I actually block off the e7 square, which that checkmate first I didn't notice. That checkmate first I didn't notice, but now that I was looking for that e7 block and I knew that the checkmate was also there, I sort of combined the pieces together and now I've actually gotten the solution. So, if I'm not mistaken, this should do. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful problem, really. I like that checkmate pattern, and I can't believe that I actually couldn't piece those parts of the puzzle together. Piece the parts of the puzzle together. That's quite a tongue twister. Alright, I don't have a lot of resources, which means that this should be an easy puzzle, right? Because there's just so little options. If I take the pawn, he takes, I check. I lose more pieces than I win, but then I can promote my pawn, which I think is all this problem is about. I just take out the rook and promote the pawn at the cost of a minor piece. So rook check. If knight takes, then I might have a problem. So that's kind of the main thing here. Oh, I think rook c3 is enough, because rook c3, knight takes, and then I promote the pawn, and rook c3, rook takes, I take the rook with my bishop, right? It's interference, essentially, right? Interference with the rook. The rook isn't going anywhere, but the pieces that are going to be placed in between are the main problem. And that means I actually think I can win the game. Yeah, sure. Why not, right? Why not? Kaboom. That is a really cool problem. Really just conceptually, just very simple, but very crystal clear, right? It just really clearly demonstrates a concept. I like those kinds of puzzles. They're never really high rated, but that's just, that's too bad, but... Alright, well, in this one, again, we don't have a lot of resources. So all we have to do is one little thing to tip the odds in our favor and we're done. Maybe a pawn break here is going to be the right play, like b4 is going to be the right move, I think. b4, and I don't see how he can stop the pawns from advancing, right? Maybe I need to do some preparatory moves first, so I really want to just check what the hell is happening. Let's see, b4, knight c5 or something like that. b3, pawn takes. Ah, yeah, and if either of the pawns take, then I just walk with the pawn that now no longer has any sort of stop on that file. So I'm going to play b4. Because I see no other potential. I see no way to take the knight on a white square with black, dark squared bishop, right? It's like, there's just nothing I can do in that regard. Alright, always want to keep your eye out. Like, obviously b3, knight takes b2, or even takes a2 would be even better, right? Because then the knight can't even sacrifice itself. Yeah, let's see, pawn takes c3, knight has to move out of the way. It can't go to b3 because that's actually where the pawn is right now. Also, I haven't really checked that beforehand, but the problem is there was no other potential. So I guess I should have actually calculated that, but I didn't. So that's quite bad. So knight takes, there's no other way. Alright, that's a pretty cool problem. Could have fucked it up, but I clearly didn't. There's really nothing else to be done there. And I'll go for one more. And then we'll call it a day, because we're already doing this for over 20 minutes. Time sure flies. Alright, let's look at this one. So, if we look at this, king looks to be in dire straits. I have no resources with my pawn. That's not going to ever promote. So, really, it's just a checkmate problem. You know that instantly. Right, those macro, I call those macro evaluations, right? Just evaluating what type of problem it is, right? In the roughest sense of the word. Just like, is it a checkmate problem? Is it about getting a piece? And sometimes you can be wrong, but just doing that analysis, even if you're wrong, can already give you very useful information. Alright, so I'm thinking knight c7 check, king a5. Only two squares that it can now reach are b4 and, well, not b4. It can't go anywhere right now. But if I go bishop b6 check, it can actually go to b4. So maybe, just maybe, a3 is like the really special tactic here. That just solves the puzzle. Because really, if you do that, there's no longer an escape. And otherwise you'd have to pull back the bishop. And I don't know if he can defend against that incoming attack then. Let's see. So let's say I pull back the bishop. Bishop e3. And then pawn takes... no, wait, just pawn b2, right? And I do knight check. Wait, can't he actually just play bishop e5 instead to block, to prevent that knight check from being lethal, right? Just trade the pieces off. So maybe if I do a3 and he does bishop e5, what's the difference here? What can I do? I really have to do it now. I think I have to play knight c7 check first. Then he has to play the king already. And then I can play a3. Yeah, I think that's the way to play it, because then actually he can't stop me anymore. Let's see, then he does have c3 as new access square for his bishop because the knight is moved. So both tactics, both move orders have a specific disadvantage at what can happen in that moment in time because of the positions of the pieces at that time, right? So knight c7 check, king a5. What's happening here with pawn a3, bishop c3, and wait, I think I can even just do bishop b6 check, because there's no square that he can go to anyway. That square that I wanted to play bishop b4 check, but obviously b4 was already covered. The reason I wanted to do that last time, there's actually no reason for it ever, because it could take b4 if it's not already covered. And if it's covered, then you don't have to go there, right? So you can just go bishop b6. So that's the right way of playing this, really. That's a checkmate. Alright, that's actually, apparently that problem has a relatively high rating. So nice to also demonstrate a slightly higher rated puzzle. And that's a nice way to gain like 50 rating points. So yeah, that's 24 minutes of chess tactics. Some failures and some solutions. I hope you guys found that enjoyable and maybe even learned something. And I'll see you guys in the next one.